Welcome to Daily Life in the Past. Here, we explore how ordinary people lived before modern technology and comfort shaped everyday life. If you enjoy learning about the past, feel free to leave a comment and let us know where you are watching from. And if you would like to support the channel, a like or subscription is always appreciated. Meals and work have always been linked. For most of human history, people did not eat for fun or variety. They ate to keep working, to stay warm, and to recover from hard days. When we study daily food in the past, we are also studying daily labor, daily time, and daily survival. This video explains how meals and labor fit together across different historical periods. We will look at what people ate, when they ate, and why those choices matched the kind of work they had to do. We will also explain energy needs in simple terms, including why some jobs required more food, why some diets were heavy in bread or grains, and why meal timing mattered when there were no modern refrigerators, no electric stoves, and no fast transport. First, it helps to define energy in practical terms. Food contains energy that the body can use. Today we measure that energy in calories, meaning units that describe how much energy food can provide. People in the past did not count calories, but they understood the results. If a worker did not eat enough, the worker tired faster, worked slower, became more likely to get sick, and recovered less well after injury. If a worker ate more than needed for a long time, the worker could gain weight, though in many settings that was harder for poor laborers and easier for elites. Energy needs rise when work is harder, when the weather is colder, and when the person is larger or still growing. A person doing heavy physical work can need thousands of calories each day. That is not a modern discovery. It is visible in historical food systems. Across many societies, the most common pattern was simple. The people doing the most physical work relied on cheap, filling foods that could be produced in large amounts and stored for long periods. The key words here are cheap, filling, and storable. In many regions, that meant grains. Grains can be dried, kept for months, and turned into bread, porridge, or thick soups. Grain-based foods are also easy to share in a household and easy to carry to a work site. That is why bread, porridge, and grain stews appear again and again in records of working people. A second key idea is that meal schedules often followed work schedules. In farming societies, daylight controlled the day. In cities, markets and workshops controlled the day. On ships, watches and strict rations controlled the day. The form of labor shaped the form of meals. Now let us move across time. In very early human societies, long before farms and cities, hunting and gathering demanded constant movement and flexible meals. Work and food collection were the same activity. There often was not a sharp line between working time and meal time. People gathered plants, dug roots, collected fruit, hunted animals, and carried food back to a camp. Some eating happened during the work itself, especially when food could be eaten quickly and safely in small pieces. In these societies, energy demands depended on the daily travel distance, the effort of digging or carrying, and the success of hunting. Some days were easier, some were harder. Food access also changed with seasons. When food was plentiful, meals could be larger or more frequent. When food was scarce, meals could shrink, and people had to balance effort against reward. But even here, there was a basic pattern. Work intensity and food intake were linked. People needed reliable calories. They often got them from starchy plants when available, and from fat and protein when hunting was successful. They also had to plan around carrying limits. You cannot carry large amounts of liquid or bulky food very far without effort. That encouraged portable foods and shared meals back at camp. When farming became common, daily labor and daily meals changed in major ways. Agriculture created both stability and risk. It could produce large stores of grain, but it also required long stretches of intense labor at specific times of year, like planting and harvest. Farming societies built daily routines around that work. For many farmers, the day started early. Work began at sunrise or before, especially in busy seasons. A morning meal, if it happened, tended to be simple. It might be leftover bread, porridge, or a small amount of beer or similar drink. The purpose was to start moving, not to hold a long social meal. In many parts of ancient and medieval Europe, the major meal often came in the middle of the day or later afternoon, when workers needed to refill energy during long hours outside. This is different from many modern workdays, where lunch is short and dinner is the largest meal. In earlier periods, the main meal could happen earlier because it supported continued labor in daylight. Another point is that meal counts were not always 3 meals a day. Modern ideas of breakfast, lunch, and dinner do not map neatly onto earlier periods. In some times and places, 2 meals were normal for many people. In other times and places, laborers might add an early bite because they needed it, while elites might avoid breakfast as a sign of restraint. Meal patterns often reflected social class as much as biology. In the ancient Roman world, for example, there were named meals at different times. A small breakfast could happen at dawn, a light meal could happen around midday, and the main meal could be later. But the timing and size could vary by class and by type of work. Manual workers often kept a routine that fit physical labor. People with fewer physical demands could shift meals later, especially when social customs favored long evening dining. This shows an important idea. The body's energy needs are real, but cultures organize mealtime in different ways. The same human body can be fed with different schedules, as long as the total energy and basic nutrients are met. But the schedule matters for comfort and performance. A laborer who must lift, dig, or carry all day usually benefits from getting a large portion of daily calories before the work is finished. Moving into medieval Europe, we can see the link between meals and work very clearly. For many peasants and rural workers, the main foods were bread and pottage. Pottage was a thick stew made from grains and whatever vegetables were available, sometimes with beans or small bits of meat for flavor. These foods were practical. Bread and pottage are energy-dense, use common crops, and can feed a family from one pot. Why did these foods fit heavy labor? Because they provide carbohydrates, which the body can turn into quick energy for muscles. Grain-based meals also provide some protein, especially when mixed with beans or peas. They are not perfect nutrition, but they are efficient for fueling long physical work. Meal timing often matched the field schedule. Workers might eat something at daybreak, especially in seasons when the workday was long. A more substantial meal could happen late morning to early afternoon, sometimes eaten in the fields. That reduced travel time back to the home and kept labor going. Then a lighter meal could happen near sunset when work ended. In many villages, meals also connected to shared labor and household organization. Cooking fuel was limited and time mattered. If you could keep one pot going and feed many people, you saved fuel and labor. That is one reason stews and porridges appear so often across history. There is also the issue of safe drinks. In many places, water quality was uncertain. Fermented drinks like small beer or weak ale could be safer because the brewing process involved boiling and fermentation. These drinks also added calories. For a laborer, a drink that provides both fluid and energy is valuable. It is not the same as modern strong alcohol use. In many cases, the drink was low in alcohol and served as part of daily nutrition. Another factor is the food economy. In many pre-modern systems, wages were low or irregular, and part of a worker's pay could come as food. Households could also rely on gardens, foraging, and seasonal supplements. This meant that the diet could change sharply by season. In late winter or early spring, stores ran low. Meals could become thinner. In late summer and fall, fresh foods were more available, and meals could become more varied. Now consider cities and skilled labor. Urban workers like builders, porters, and craft workers often needed steady energy but had different food access than farmers. They could buy food in markets and might eat more bread, cheese, dried fish, or cooked foods sold by vendors. But the same core need remained: affordable calories that fit a long workday. One reason bread is so central in many historical diets is not only farming, but also measurement and control. Grain could be taxed, stored, and counted. Authorities could set standards for bread weight and price. This made bread a key part of the whole economic system. When bread prices rose, workers suffered quickly because bread was a major share of their calories. Work also shaped what kinds of foods were possible during the day. Without modern containers, without refrigeration, and without fast transport, many foods could spoil or become unsafe. That pushed workers toward foods that lasted: bread, hard cheese, dried foods, salted meats, pickled foods, and thick cooked mixtures that could be reheated. A related idea is digestion and work. Heavy labor right after a very heavy meal can be uncomfortable. So many work cultures developed practical patterns: a modest bite early, a stronger meal at a break, then work again, then a final meal for recovery. The exact schedule varied, but the logic of performance and comfort was common. Let us move from land to sea, where the link between food and labor becomes even more mechanical. On ships, food systems were designed to keep crews working in confined space, under strict routine, for long periods. Sailors could not rely on fresh food for months. That meant rations had to be durable: hard bread or biscuit, salted beef or pork, dried peas, oatmeal, and sometimes cheese or butter. Drinks could include beer or diluted spirits, depending on the navy and period. This is a clear example of food as fuel for labor. Sailors had hard physical tasks: hauling ropes, climbing rigging, pumping water, handling sails, and moving heavy loads in storms. To keep that work possible, rations could be very high in calories, sometimes higher than what poor workers ate on land. The diet might not be rich in vitamins, which could lead to problems like scurvy without fresh produce, but the calorie goal was to keep labor going. Now shift forward to early modern and industrial settings. As economies changed, many workers moved into mining, factories, and large construction projects. Work hours could be long, and work could be intense and repetitive. Meals had to fit strict schedules set by employers, machines, and shift systems. In early industrial Britain and other industrial regions, many working families relied heavily on bread and other cheap carbohydrates, along with tea and sugar as these became more common. Potatoes also became an important staple in many areas because they could produce a lot of calories per acre and could support large populations. These foods made sense under pressure. They were affordable, filling, and suited to quick preparation. Industrial work also changed the meaning of breaks. Instead of seasonal peaks like harvest, factories could demand steady production year-round. That encouraged short meal breaks and portable foods. Workers might bring bread, cheese, or simple pies. Hot meals might be limited by time and by access to cooking equipment near the job. At the same time, industrial cities created new food markets. Some workers could buy prepared food from street sellers. Others depended on a single pot meal at home, often cooked by family members who also worked. The goal remained steady energy on limited budget. Energy needs in industrial work were not always the same as farm labor. Some factory jobs were very demanding, but others involved long hours with less whole-body movement. However, stress, cold workplaces, and long shifts still raised calorie needs. Poor diets could lead to fatigue and illness. Employers and reformers sometimes argued about whether workers were underfed, whether wages were enough, and whether better food would raise productivity. Across these periods, one pattern repeats: when work is hard and wages are low, people choose the cheapest calories. That often means starch. Starch can come from grains like wheat, rye, barley, oats, maize, and rice, or from starchy roots like potatoes and cassava. These foods build the base of the diet. Protein and fat often come second, added when possible. This leads to an important point about balanced diets. Modern nutrition advice often emphasizes variety, fruits and vegetables, and lean proteins. In the past, variety was limited for most people, especially in winter. Yet people still survived and worked because the body can run on a fairly narrow range of foods if it gets enough energy and basic nutrients. The costs were often seen in health over time: stunted growth in children during bad periods, higher vulnerability to disease, and seasonal weakness. Another important link between meals and work is control. In many historical systems, meal access was part of social discipline. If you controlled food, you controlled labor. In households, heads of households controlled distribution. In estates, landlords could demand rents paid in grain. In armies and navies, officers controlled rations. In workshops, masters could provide meals to apprentices. In some forms of forced labor, food was used as a tool to push people to work and to keep them barely able to continue. This is not only about cruelty, it is about organization. Any large labor system needs a reliable way to keep workers physically functioning. Food is the most basic tool for that. But when food is scarce, unequal, or used as leverage, it becomes part of power. Meal timing also shaped social order. A shared meal could mark a break in the workday and reinforce hierarchy. Who sat where, who ate first, and who got meat were signals of status. In many places, elites ate refined bread and more meat, while laborers ate darker bread and more pottage. That difference was not only taste, it reflected access to land, animals, and trade. Now let us return to the basic question: how did people match energy needs to work without modern science? They did it through tradition, observation, and economics. Communities learned what foods kept people going. They learned which crops stored well. They learned what could be carried to the fields. They learned what could be cooked in bulk. Over time, food systems became shaped around labor systems. For a heavy laborer, the practical diet often had these features. First, a high share of carbohydrates for immediate energy. Bread, porridge, rice, or other starches met this need. Second, enough total calories, even if the diet lacked luxury. Quantity mattered. Many working diets were simple, but large in volume. Third, some protein and fat when available. Beans, peas, dairy, small amounts of meat, fish, or animal fat could add protein and help with long-term strength and recovery. Fourth, fluids that were safe and sometimes caloric. Fermented drinks or boiled drinks could reduce illness risk. Fifth, meals timed to the workday. More energy earlier when work would be long, and a restorative meal after the work ended. For people with lighter physical labor but high social demands, the diet could be different. The wealthy could eat more animal products, sweets, and refined grains. Their meals could be longer and later. In some settings, elites had more time for dining as a social act. That did not mean they worked less in every way, but their energy output was often lower than that of field workers. Seasons mattered in all periods. In farming societies, the work year was not evenly intense. During harvest, energy needs were extremely high. Many communities increased food intake in harvest season if they could. In winter, work could shift toward indoor tasks, maintenance, or crafts, depending on climate. Food might be more limited, and diets often leaned even more on stored grains and preserved foods. Technology also shaped the link between meals and work. The more efficient the cooking tools, the easier it is to prepare food that supports labor. In many early households, cooking meant a hearth, a pot, and a lot of time. Grinding grain into flour was labor itself, often done by hand or with simple mills. Baking bread took fuel and planning. When mills, ovens, and market bakeries became more common, they reduced time costs for households and allowed workers to get bread more regularly. In cities, specialized food sellers grew because workers needed food near the job. In industrial settings, later innovations like canteens and organized meal breaks appeared in some places, partly because employers wanted steady output. Another factor is the human body's limits. Even if someone needs 3,000 or 4,000 calories a day, the person has to be able to eat that amount. That often means eating energy-dense foods. Large amounts of watery vegetables are healthy, but they are hard to use as the main fuel source for heavy labor because they do not provide enough calories by volume. That is why labor diets so often centered on bread, porridge, and thick stews. This also explains why fat can be important. Fat contains a lot of energy in a small amount. When available, animal fat, butter, or oils could add calories without adding too much bulk. However, fats could be expensive. Many poor workers got most calories from starch, with fat used mainly for flavor or occasional enrichment. Now consider the relationship between meals and productivity. In many historical sources, there is a repeated belief that better-fed workers work better. Sometimes employers provided meals because it improved output. Apprentices often received room and board because training required stable living. Armies marched on rations because soldiers cannot fight on empty stomachs. On the other side, food shortages could lead to labor disruption, unrest, and migration. Food is also tied to recovery. Hard labor causes small muscle damage that needs repair. Protein helps repair tissue, and calories prevent the body from breaking down itself for fuel. If calories are too low, recovery slows. Over time, underfed workers become weaker and more prone to injury. This is one reason why historic populations were sensitive to harvest failures and price spikes. When the main staple becomes expensive, workers cannot simply eat a little less without consequences. The small reduction in daily calories might not show immediately, but over weeks it can lower strength and immunity. In a world where many jobs were physical and medicine was limited, that mattered. Let us put all of this together into a simple summary across periods. In hunting and gathering societies, work and food collection were closely linked. Eating could happen during foraging, and shared meals followed successful trips. Energy needs depended on movement, carrying, and season. In ancient farming societies, meals often followed daylight and field routines. Grain-based foods supported long work. Meal timing could include a small early meal, a larger meal during the day, and another meal after work. In the Roman world, named meals existed and the main meal's timing shifted over time, especially among elites. Manual laborers often followed a schedule that fit work demands. In medieval Europe, laboring diets commonly centered on bread, pottage, and small beer or ale, with meat as an occasional addition. Meal patterns could be 2 main meals with variations, and many workers ate in the fields. On ships and in armies, rations were designed to keep people working under strict control, using durable foods that traveled well. In industrial societies, long shifts and urban life encouraged portable meals and cheap calories, often from bread, potatoes, and other starchy staples, with new patterns shaped by factories and wage systems. Across all of these settings, the relationship between meals and labor is not a side detail. It is central. Food was not only culture, it was an energy system that supported the work that built fields, roads, ships, cities, and industries. When we study daily meals in the past, we are studying how people managed time, effort, and limited resources. The foods chosen were usually not chosen because they were interesting. They were chosen because they worked. They could be grown, stored, cooked, carried, shared, and turned into energy day after day. That is the basic historical connection between daily meals and work. The body needed fuel, and societies built food routines that matched the labor they demanded.